Namaste,
Namaste.
and welcome to our continuing series, Savitri is the Message, as always with our beloved Alok. We are in the Book of Yoga, Book 7, and we'll begin with the quote, beginning, O soul. O soul, bear not thy kingdom to the foe. Consent to hide thy royalty of bliss, lest time and fate find out its avenues, and beat with thunderous knock upon thy gates. Hide, whilst thou canst, thy treasure of separate self, behind the luminous rampart of thy depths, till of a vaster empire it grows part. But not for self alone, the self is one. Content, abide not with one conquered realm. Adventure all to make the whole world thine. To break into greater kingdoms, turn thy force.
This is the voice of light after the voice of night. So, Savitri has had the psychic realization, and along with that, she has an opening of the centers. This part was an easy part. Sri Aurobindo says, easy relatively. Sri Aurobindo says the only thing that is safe in the yoga is psychic realization. All else is or can be dangerous. And that's why he says that first thing should be realizing the psychic being, becoming one with it. Then, when you go through the entire adventure, cosmic adventure, at least you have that door which is open in which you can always get in and stay quiet while the storm is raging outside. So, Savitri has also realized the psychic, and it's so beautiful. Life is beautiful. There is no death. Means the fear of death is gone. What is there? I'll come again and again and take the journey. That's a state. I will travel with him. And the reality of death as we understand in ignorance vanishes. One knows it's a change of forms. And she could stay in that state and be regarded as a saintly human being, saintly person for the rest of her life. So while she's in that state, because she has come for a greater work, suddenly an abyss opens and she's invaded by an unknown fear. And that unknown fear tells her that all this is, none of this is true. All this psychic state, this wonderful state, devotion, faith, all this, uplifted, exalted feelings, these are not true. I am truth and I am death. I am all else is a maya, including the experiences that you are having. And all else is a cheat, an illusion, and the real truth is of nothingness. Now it is an unknown fear that invades her because it's like a doubt which can corrode the entire thing.
And it's not entirely false.
Yeah, it's not entirely false.
Death is speaking some truth also.
Only twisting it by the tail. So, now we have the voice of the light after the voice of night. And that's what is the interesting part. And it's for all of us to remember. So otherwise, one is that we stop at psychic realization, which is wonderful. That's what we see in certain mystics in the, lot of bhakti yoga in India, a lot of bhakti yoga in the Christian mysticism, Sufism, and even when they had some experiences of the beyond, it stopped with that higher consciousness. But here there is a different work altogether. So the voice of light reminds her, the voice of light after the voice of night, the cry of the abyss drew heaven's reply, a might of storm chased by the might of the sun. O soul, bear not thy kingdom to the foe. So who is the foe here? It is the inconscient. So one is, don't start revealing what all is happened inside you and what you have realized. Just contain it within. Normally it is said that the experiences and realizations have to be talked either to the guru and certainly not to people who are, adverse to the whole yoga, because either they throw jealousy or doubts and corrode it. Unless they are established deep within, and the standard practice is 10 years. 10 years, you had something, it is fixed inside the consciousness. Otherwise,
When I had my first experience with Sri Aurobindo, Mother wrote back, do not try to make a mental thing of it, because
Yes.
it will be quite useless.
yes. And also, sometimes, of course, if one is not careful, it can enter the head and all kinds of things can happen. So, first thing is, bear not thy kingdom to the foe. Consent to hide thy royalty of bliss. Practically, it means I am mother's favorite child, I am a special child, I am in contact with the divine. I am, so be careful. I am an instrument of God. One may be, but the whole creation is an instrument of God, seen from one side. Maybe this or that, but all creation is nothing else but a manifestation of the divine and instrument of the divine. Lest time and fate find out its seven news. So you see, the story of Krishna now gives a deeper sense. So Krishna is born. Quietly he has gone away from the prison. But Kansa is trying to find where is he, chasing him. So all around he has sent his people, time and fate. Find it out. Find its seven news.
Because if they find those avenues, then they can knock upon the gates.
And be it with thunderous knock upon thy gates. So one should never, I am even these things that, Divine Mother is with me, what can happen to me? It is a truth. But when this truth can be spoken in a beautiful way, this truth can be spoken in a braggart way. So one has to be careful.
Yes.
And that this is a little shift. It's the inner state one should be careful about. Hide whilst thou canst thy treasure of separate self. It won't be for long, but hide as long as you can hide. With the Divine Mother, we see this, that how she, later on she speaks about all these experiences, but how carefully she had hidden all this. And in Japan, people didn't know who she is, but they felt a tremendous sweetness oozing out from her. And they were drawn to her because of that sweetness. And of course, she was known as somebody who could understand the depths of human nature, its complexities. But she did not speak that time about her realizations. Later on, she said, and that's perfectly valid, so that everyone.
And even in the prayers, it seems that
they were not meant for.
They were not. They were not her prayers. They were meant for us.
Yeah, but for a long time she did not allow its publication.
That's right.
It is Sri Aurobindo who insisted that she should publish it. So only, if I remember correctly,
he translated many
some of them,
too. Yes.
many of them, and only 1/5 of the prayers have been published. The rest, she tore away the pages which were deeply personal, and they were burned. She didn't want anybody to read them. Hide whilst thou canst thy treasure of separate self. Behind the luminous rampart of thy depth, still of a vaster empire, it grows apart. One day, one will burst into the cosmic consciousness. Then you can't help it. But till then, stay with it. And then, but not for self alone, the self is one. This hiding is not meant to be forever, that you're there. One day you have to enter into the larger work. And because it's not only for your own mukti, your own liberation, because finding the psychic being is actually a freedom. One is liberated. One is freed from the fundamental ignorance that who am I? One knows who one is. Content abide not with one conquered realm, adventure all to make the whole world thine. To break into greater kingdoms, turn thy force. So now the next step is the cosmic consciousness, which we see in the next canto, but there is something which must happen before that. This is what is being described to us. Fear not to be nothing, that thou mayest be all. Because it means when Mother came to India, she says, when I came, I understood what is meant by renouncing your experience. So what she did was, you have to, when you step out into the cosmic consciousness, you can no more be all the time in that state of intense psychic. You have entered into a larger kingdom. And we see both in Sri Aurobindo and the mother's case, how when they entered into that state, I have been digging deep and long into horror of filth on Maya. You have to get past that, because otherwise you cannot enter into the work. But it is always, the door is open. At any point of time you can enter, because that's what you have already claimed.
Yes.
So now comes that part. Ascend to the emptiness of the Supreme, that all in thee may reach its absolute. That means now detailed working starts on each and every part of nature.
Yes.
Everything has to be taken to the Supreme. That all in thee may reach its absolute, except to be small and human on the earth. So then, naturally, you are. I think the other day I was mentioning about the experience somebody watching television and watching a football match. Except to be human and ordinary. At one place, there is a letter of Sri Aurobindo. Early days, when people wanted to come and join, he would say, no, no. And he even writes that if you come, you won't even understand my state. I am practicing the yoga as a householder. And then there are a number of things he says. And at one point, he even goes on to say, he says, if you come here, you have to be ready and willing to be like the most ordinary of the ordinary human beings. Then you can follow the path, because the yoga Shakti will touch the most hidden, the most ordinary, the most small parts.
Even the darkest.
Even the darkest, because that's how it operates. So if one wants to remain like a holy man, like a, great human being who is always revered and respected, then yes, it's okay. There is a psychic realization, there are some experiences of the higher consciousness. That's it. That was the old yogas. But here, and it goes on, interrupting thy newborn divinity, that man may find his utter self in God. So that's what we see in the mother, and that's why people couldn't understand how she, for a long time, the mother would not step out. She would stay in a room, and most of the time, and that famous thing about Amrit Da, he asked Sri Aurobindo, she is a great yogin, yes, she is the greatest of yogins, but she doesn't give meditation. Amrit Da tells Sri Aurobindo, she says, yes, but one day, impelled by the divine love, she will step out, and that indeed will be a great day. And then when she stepped out, everything, the department, this, that, the whole creation, Auroville and the world.
I'll continue.
Yeah, please.
If for thy own sake only thou hast come, an immortal spirit into the mortal's world, to found thy luminous kingdom in God's dark, in the unconscious realm one shining star, one door in the ignorance opened upon light. Why hadst thou any need to come at all?
Yes. If it is just to realize the psychic being, well, the soul knows itself, or to have self-realization. So why there was a need to come? So we are children of immortality, true, but we have come here in the realm of death to build immortally with mortal things. That's how Sri Aurobindo puts.
Yes.
To build immortally with mortal things. This is the work. Because there is darkness, the children of light must come, clarioning darknesses end. This is the work for which we have come. And not just to realize that little lamp inside, which anyways is burning in the dark. Thou hast come down into a struggling world to aid a blind and suffering mortal race, to open to light the eyes that could not see, to bring down bliss into the heart of grief, to make thy life a bridge twixt earth and heaven. In one of her conversations, the mother speaks of the double movement of yoga. She says the individual and the collective movement, and she says there is an interdependence. So the effort also must be a two-way effort. Individual yoga is one part, But then there is also the dimension of the collective yoga, the mankind, and if not mankind, at least those who are around. And it must be that participation through which everybody evolves. And then she says, now you will understand why I have collective meditations. In collective meditations, what happens is that those who are more developed inside, by developed I mean the,
Realize.
and the urge is, the fire is much more. And it automatically gets, in a way, distributed. So those who have smaller fire, they catch it. And they stand to gain. But on the other hand, those who have a greater fire will be sharing it. And it's a very interesting process. It's a kind of leveling, but it helps the collective good, because if the collectivity doesn't advance simultaneously, the individual will also stop after a point. So,
May I ask what you see right now in the world regarding collective versus individual?
well, man is trying to figure out the right balance. It's one of the most difficult things to find. Because the individuality that has been talked about in the last, I think, few decades mostly, is the surface ego individuality. But it was necessary for man to at least assert himself vis-a-vis the society and the collectivity. He had to break free. He could not wait for the entire social advance, society to advance. So in 60s we see that the urge for individuality became very strong, and it took all kinds of shapes. That's one part. Now we see that there is a different movement also simultaneously, where large groups of mankind are coming up with an aspiration which is, like in Corona time, for instance. Now a mail has been circulating that let's all meditate together, and they fixed a time and different zones. This one way, I'm not for or against, I'm just saying that people want to come together for a greater good.
And Yoga Day?
Yoga Day, unity, people want. So there is this aspect of, now because certain individuals who broke free, out of them, because they broke free from the standard social norms, they started going here, there, and some landed up with, in the right spot. Some. But because of that, there was a growth of individuals all over. Now, this idea that I have to follow the standard format in which my life has been fixed forever was gone. This they did as a first. Otherwise, many people wouldn't have been able to land up even in Pondicherry. People used to tell that don't send your children here. Why? Because there is a magic going on there. What is the magic? They don't feel like going back. And the stories, you'll see a case against Sri Aurobindo. At 17 years of age, somebody has come and there is a case registered there in the files. What is the case? He has kidnapped the child who is here. So later on, all this started, this consent and all. Amrita, he came at a very young age, but of course with his, because he grew up with Sri Aurobindo. Then there was, I think it was Gangadharan ji, and he came around 17, and or one of the persons from nearby, Tirunelveli, it must be Gangadharan. And the parents said, how can he stay on there? He wants to be here. But the parents are completely against, and technically you just can't keep a 17-year-old child. And how he used to come swimming through the river, and then he would come telling them that I am, going somewhere else to studies, and he would come here. Amal Kiran, the famous instance, because parents won't allow him to travel unless he gets married. So he got married. Daulat Pandey also wanted to come. Both of them got married just to come here. But because parents won't allow, so they took a ticket to Kolkata, that we are going for honeymoon to Calcutta. And very well planned, from Calcutta they came to Chennai, from there to Pondicherry. Till Chennai they informed parents, said, now that we have come here, we thought we might as well go to Pondicherry. But you can't stay indifferent. So this was the state. So individuals broke free from that norm, which was necessary.
We could talk a little bit about Amrita's situation and Nolini, because Amrita's parents wanted him to get married.
Yeah?
And there was no way out of this. So Sri Aurobindo told Nalini, cut his hair.
And Nalnida writes with a surgical precision. At night, he cut his hair without his realizing that the surgery is being done. And next day morning, and it saved him from marriage. So that was the state that time. Even women could not imagine to come to, place. This is the story of Jayadi in 1928 when she came to meet Sri Aurobindo. She was going to Rameshwaram, and because of Tirth Yatra, she has been allowed some permission. But she wanted to see Sri Aurobindo. After seeing, she doesn't go further. And Sri Aurobindo asked her that, you don't want to go to Rameshwaram? He said, I've seen the living Rameshwaram, why should I go?
Yes.
But one day she says that, I have one prayer to you. What is the prayer? Don't make me a woman in next life. But why? He says, what do you know the difficulties and challenges of a woman? Just to come here, I had to ask so much, convince my parents and everybody just to come here. We see the same thing in Eshadi's life. How much rebel.
Yes.
And Sri Aurobindo smiles and gives an answer. Don't worry, it will not be necessary. The age is going to change in such a way that women will have as much freedom as men. So this whole phase of individuality was needed and still is needed, because still there are, lot of things.
Yes.
But out of these individuals, there is a group which has come to realize that within the human boundaries, it's very limited. So Sri Aurobindo speaks of these 4 stages of social development and the standards of conduct. First is when one is like a brute. So brute is alone. He is one kind of individuality. He just, might is right. Whatever I feel like doing, I'll do. Whoever wins is, the victor is like Sugriv and Bali. That's it. Then to control the brute, there comes the social law, which is what we see that, do's, don'ts. Thus, women will not go to temples and such places in a particular time. All these rules and regulations of a society come. It controls the brute. And for the brute, this is external control is the one which is needed. Then there is a revolt and the individual stage comes. So then you have individuals. And then individual realizes his limitations. Individual is formed by struggling against the society. He is a rebel, revolt. He tries to form his own views, ideas about life and things. And then comes the 4th stage where he surrenders the individuality to the divine. So at every level you will have certain washouts. So when the individual break free from the society, some will reach that point of realizing that I have to surrender myself to the divine. But you have to go through this stage. Now the more this number increases who are surrendering to the divine, the more you will see in the true sense a collective change beginning upon earth. So that's exactly what, when Nalnida was asked, when there was confusion going on in Auroville and ashram and society, all these problems. So people wanted to bring people together and, have a bond harmony. He said, don't do that. For the moment, it is good that each one grows in their own way. And the mother says the same thing in 1957-58 conversation, probably 57. She says, you must become a Gnostic being before you can talk about a Gnostic collectivity. And she has a big vision of the big hotel, which is one of those human collectivities. And she says, what is the nature of this collectivity? She says, the religious collectivity is formed based on a common belief system or a common code of conduct. And she says, this is the ancient types of collectivity. But here, it will not be based on anything external, but on something internal. Now, this is where you see the ashram specializes in. You don't know who is really, engaged deeply with the inner life and who is not. You can be totally taken away because there is no external marker. So that's because she has taken away all that, because otherwise there is a tendency to form an collectivity around a mental ideal. And all over the world, In a message, she says that a new world has been born, and all over the world there are people who feel it and sense it.
Yes.
It is to them we call, will you collaborate? So I think all this churning that is going on will eventually catapult a few more individuals into the higher, and out of the social mass, few more into the individual state. This is what is happening. Because the society's hold is gone. That old conventional way of do's and don't, that is gone for sure.
And the old moralities.
Oh, that's gone. That's gone. Yes. Completely gone. There is, that's very evident. And then this individual stage, and then the next stage. So this is a process through which, out of the mass of mankind, in the typical social order, conventional social order, because of this churning, are throwing up like a rebel. See, in the Western context, if you go to Europe, there are many people who are atheists. And Sri Aurobindo says it is a necessary phase. Because otherwise you have to believe in that kind of religion which may stifle your evolving impulse. So atheism became necessary, agnosticism became necessary. With all that came individuality. And then from the individual you will see few people. Suddenly something opens. I think many of us have gone through this stage. At least I have gone through agnosticism. And then you enter, when you surrender, when you have broken free from all that, then you are ready for a true collective yoga. Otherwise, just calling people together and doing some kind of, sitting together, sharing some meal together, lectures together. There are people who try that kind of stuff.
But mostly they fail.
It is bound to fail. I had a friend, a Muslim friend, a good friend in Air Force days. And he would take a great pride that in our community, religion, we all sit together and eat. So it is called Dastarkhan. So, he would invite us that you sit and eat. I have no issues about sitting and eating, but that doesn't mean anything. So I used to tell him, this is not what is really required. Are your hearts one with those who don't believe in what you believe in? Just sitting and eating together, it's like brotherhood, but those who believe in my way of life or my understanding of life. Now this is bound to fail because it's so limited. Human beings will see through it, and they are seeing through it. So both level work is going on. Even in Auroville, there are some who are coming out of even societies, even Auroville is wonderful. There is a tendency to become crystallized into a formation. People will break through. Now out of that, some will take to the next step. Okay, they will understand. Actually, what we have not done is, we are all into this mental idea, Auroville, wonderful. But have we really surrendered to the mother? This was the original plan. There will be few, maybe a handful out of all this churning. And as people do that, you will see a true Gnostic collective coming into existence.
Thank you, Alok.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask one more. Yeah. I know I'm digressing, but
no.
What do you feel about the tamas in India?
This, actually, I'll tell you now what I see, because I keep abreast with some of the TV programs, to tell you frankly. I don't watch them, to be clear, but if it is going on, I see what is happening. I see, on the contrary, a tremendous rajas. Tremendous rajas. And if you see recently, last 5-6 years, and I am really not saying about a political party or very apolitically, such innovative things are coming out. I don't know from where people are getting ideas. And every day you will see, and plenty of it. I am keeping in touch with the latest is like, people have a tendency to spit. This is one kind of tamas. I don't care. Now, one of the things which have come up recently, I'm sure, I don't know, it must be there in the West, but I know about India, this has come up, is to create paper and other things out of not just biodegradable material, but seeds are there in it, and after you throw it, you just throw it and it will grow into a tree. Now these are amazing ideas, even spittoons of that kind. Now, because India went through a long-standing tamas, then when the shake-up came, so parties and this and that, was it intense play of rajas, ambition and occupying the chair, all over it was there. Now this is shaking up. There are pockets where tamas is there. I don't know how the situation in Bihar now, but Bihar used to be extremely tamas. People are not interested in anything. Even Far East, It used to be at some point like that. A person will not take you on a rickshaw or anything just because why it's afternoon, he wants to just have a nap or he wants to drink. But even there, the changes are taking place. Even in the Far East, I know. So people are being shaken up. I personally feel that now is a phase from Rajas. Some places they are trying to enter into a more sattvic model. So this is not because of being an Indian, but I see that change which is beginning to take place. It is still very far from what it can be. But we must understand, see, the interesting part of India is you delay for a long time. But because there is that background thing, when it wakes up, it takes a leap. That we must understand. Indian mind is like that. You see, in 70 years, after 700 years of domination, how soon it is beginning to become one of the, this is Rajas, fourth or fifth military power, financial power. I mean, okay, it's not the ultimate thing. But within a short time, 70 years is nothing in the life of a nation.
Yes, yes.
After 700 years, and out of those 70, 75 years, initially we were just busy settling our own disputes and fractured, and yet the way it is rising almost like a superpower. So this is because the Indian mind has never forgotten, never really got ever cut off from the roots of Sanatana Dharma. This is the beauty of the Indian mind. Everywhere else it is lost, the Gnostic societies in the Western context, ancient Mayan civilization, the Greeks, the paganism, everything is gone. Paganism was so beautiful where, you regard sacred as everything. It was gone. Not because of Christ, but because of what people understood of him. He came to liberate mankind. But instead, again a cabin was put. But in Indian thought, because the Vedanta, the Upanishadic teachings, the Gita, it never ever died. There was fresh streams which kept on bringing out the truth in new forms. And that's why one should, India is like China is called as a sleeping giant. So India is like, Bhimsen who has just temporarily gone into the mud. The day he gets up, he realizes he is Bhimsen. He is not just an ordinary warrior. So this is what we see happening in India, and I see a great surge of that seeking, more and more, because honestly, being in contact with a lot of people, I see children and it's so amazing. I see children, at least at this point of time, I'm sure you must have met, I know at least 15 children. Children means 7, 8, 9 years of age. What an opening! It's just unbelievable. And this is a very small fraction. There must be many, many who are... And these are the hopes of the future. It's still a long way to go. We should not worry about it. Mother gave 300, 500 years. But the way it is rising, because the psychic of, yesterday I was sharing with Vivek that we are so fortunate. Things like surrender, faith, you drink with mother's milk. So the day from that stage of individuality, like I said, I was an agnostic. When I turned towards Mother and Sri Aurobindo, there were no confusions. Faith, okay, fine. Devotion, surrender. There was no confusion about all these things. It's just that I must find the path which is meant for me. Now this is meant for me, that's finished, done. So after that it was no more, oh, how do I surrender? Is the mother a being? Is she energy? This was all settled. So that is because it is there in the background. So this is what we will see. Another just 20, 30 years, maybe less than that. You will see a meteoric rise. Just preparing the base, takeoff point. Okay,
back
more
to
predictions, but
yes,
I'll just hold on to that. Yeah. So, but it's good because we are talking about the individual and the collective yoga.
Thou shalt be one with God's bare reality, and the miraculous world he has become, and the divine miracle still to be, when nature, who is now unconscious God, translucent, grows to the eternal's light. Her seeing his sight, her walk his steps of power, and life is filled with a spiritual joy, and matter is the Spirit's willing bride. Consent to be nothing and none. Dissolve time's work. Cast off thy mind. Step back from form and name. Annul thyself, that only God may be.
So, what is collective yoga is described now on page 537. Collective yoga means each person now becomes a representative. That's how in the synthesis Sri Aurobindo describes, and the mother also speaks about it. So, everyone who wins a little victory within oneself wins it for others. So, at one place, the mother speaks of it also, even in the ashram context. They may be in terms of number, same with Auroville and world over. There may be a number of 2,000, 3,000 or whatever. But people who are really engaged in the collective yoga in the true sense would be in 30s, 40, maybe 50. In the sense their consciousness has become vast enough to absorb or pick up a tendency and allow the divine consciousness to work upon it to bring out a new possibility. And here we see it begins with this: if thou would save the toiling universe, people want to save the world, okay, without getting their hands soiled. That's what SS on the Gita Sri Aurobindo says. He says, you want to help the world, but you don't want your personal hands to get dirty. That's not how it can be. That he is referring also to Gandhi, that you want to be a paragon of non-violence and a saint, while there are people who are dying. You can't do that. The teaching of the Gita is, Arjuna, that's not the path meant for you. When you engage into the battle, you will have wounds. That's exactly Balaram, Vidur, they never enter into the fight. But if you want to save the toiling world, you will share its agony and pain. So he describes the vast, universal suffering feel as thine. Thou must bear the sorrow that thou claimest to heal. For physicians, heal thyself.
The day-bringer must walk in darkest night.
Yes. Otherwise it's not possible. If you don't know what is night, how are you going to bring the light? And it's very easy to give advice. That's why people often say, sometimes they say, I could give advice to everybody. But I said, yeah, you could give advice without experiencing what they are going through. It's very easy to give advice. But when you actually go through, you realize what it means to go through what one is going through. The day bringer must walk in darkest night. He who would save the world must share its pain. If he knows not grief, how shall he find grief's cure? Of course, he is not going to talk to people, you know what grief, that's not how he operates. Sri Aurobindo, when he writes, my gaping wounds are 1,001. One would say, sir, where are the wounds? Just look at the agony he must be experiencing from the disciples who write a letter, and if the reply doesn't come next day, sir, I thought you could write on a Sunday because it's a holiday. Sri Aurobindo, they believe that on a Sunday, Sri Aurobindo is having a holiday. And Sri Aurobindo writes that if you were to see the avalanche of correspondence on my table, even the merciless, stony heart of a disciple would melt. Avalanche of correspondence. And he has no secretary to, he has to write those letters himself,
Yes.
So this is how, and this is just one example. With mother, people throwing all their anger and hostility, and she has to return it with a smile, with love. So all this one has to go through. This is how. If he knows not grief, how shall he find grief's cure? If far he walks above mortality's head, how shall the mortal reach that too high path? So one of the things that I find so beautiful about Sri Aurobindo and the mother personally, both were married, so they understand what marriage tribe means. Imagine if they never went through it and they gave a counsel. I have heard actually a person. I have heard a person counseling about. So I said, look here, it's a non-starter. Why? I said, this is a disqualified. You have not experienced what it means. It's very easy to say things unless you have gone through that door. And both of them went through all the possible issues of the world. Then they could,
Which is best that we keep silence more often.
Yes. If far he walks above mortality's head, like saintly person, they will come dressed in a certain code. They are sitting on the pulpit. People go and offer malas. They'll give a talk. Then they have a private life. Here there is nothing like that. How shall the mortal reach that too high path? If one of theirs they see scale heaven's peaks. So you have to become one of theirs. That's how he describes in the synthesis that who is the guru in synthesis? He is a child leading other children. Otherwise, you cannot follow. It's too high. So mother comes down, plays him. Her disciples who will get angry and start walking away. And the mother is leaving her game and walking behind to catch their hand and, trying to tell. It's okay, don't be so angry. If somebody saw that Leela, what would one understand? But she became like us, completely identified with us human beings. God must be born on earth and be as man, that man being human may grow even as God. He who would save the world must be one with the world. All suffering things contain in his heart's space and bear the grief and joy of all that lives. His soul must be wider than the universe. One of my favorite lines, so we'll just read it.
Yes.
And feel eternity as its very stuff, rejecting the moment's personality. That's why when mother was asked, Mother, your paintings, they're priceless, should we get them back? She said, my child, we live in eternity. My paintings, my child, we live in eternity. Rejecting the moment's personality, know itself older than the birth of time, creation an incident in its consciousness, Arcturus and Belphegor grains of fire, circling in a corner of its boundless self. My favorite lines, like you become so vast. The constellations are burning within you. That is the vastness in which one enters. The world's destruction is small, transient storm. You want to save the world? Not through activism of an ignorant kind.
Yes.
But you have to be in such a vast consciousness that paradoxical it may seem that even if the world were to be destroyed, it's a small little incident. Then you can save. So it's a paradox. If you rush into action in the way
and then you look at yourself and see how small you are.
In the calm infinity it has become. And then comes this, the entire passage.
Yes.
I'll quickly read it. If thou wouldst a little loosen the vast chain, draw back from the world that the idea has made, thy mind's selection from the infinite, thy senses gloss on the infinitesimals dance, then shalt thou know how the great bondage came. So this stepping back, much that is transient, it's of no importance. Let it come and go, fly away, and step back from form and name. This attachment to form and name. And the superconscient conscious grow on thy tops. Infinity's vision through thy gaze shall pierce. Thou shalt look into the eyes of the unknown. Find the hid truth in things seen, null and false.
Very important.
Very important. Otherwise we have a summary rejection and we end up rejecting first the world and then ourselves. I am useless. But you will see that hidden truth. It may be a small little grain. At one place the mother says, we have to extract a little ingot of gold which is hidden in a whole heap of mud and dust. Little ingot. Small little piece of gold. And the entire labor is worth it for that. And it's obviously not an easy task. Behind things known, discover mysteries rare. I know this. No, we don't know it. The mystery is rare. what is hidden behind. Thou shalt be one with God's bare reality, and the miraculous world he has become, and the diviner miracle still to be, when nature, who is now unconscious God, translucent grows to the eternal light. What is nature? Mechanical, seemingly unconscious, and yet behind it there is a consciousness, an intelligence which makes one wonder how is it planning everything in such a wonderful way. Her seeing his sight, her walk his steps of power, and life is filled with a spiritual joy, and matter is the spirit's willing bride. So this is the work. Matter has to become the spirit's willing bride. This is now we have the famous symbol of Shivalingam. The Shivalingam is the spirit, and the base which we see, that is the bride. It's the union of the divine soul with material nature. And when that can take place, then only this world can become divine. Otherwise, it'll all be, we want a beautiful world, and then we have those drugs to give you a very nice feeling, or a 2 weeks crash course in nirvana. That's not how a new world can be created. It is a real solid work. Matter will resist to make it pliable, supple. So many countless experiences are needed. And then comes these master lines. Consent to be nothing and none. Dissolve time's work. Cast of thy mind. Step back from form and name. And it is inwardly, the state of the yogin in this state is, whatever may be done, stupendous work may be done, but always there is a feeling that nothing you are doing. That sense of being a non-doer is so concrete. Nothing you are doing, because you really don't have that, there is no labor, there is no effort of that kind involved. Things happen and they develop. As Sri Aurobindo uses the word in the Gita, action develops from within. It is not something which you are striving, trying, but it develops from within. And last, annul thyself, that only God may be. So this is the next step after the psychic realization, to completely annul oneself and let God alone be, which is the, we can use the word nirvana, but you are one with the absolute. That's why he says nirvana and the all negating absolute. So that absolute consciousness, that alone is there. No more attachment to the temporary, momentary personality with which we live and dwell and are tied to. That must go. So the first step is visiting cards. But people have a way, even in visiting card you can write Nirvanananda Swami. What do you do about that? That reminds me of a semi-humorous story. Yogi Anirban, I have heard this. So how his name became Anirvan? He was Nirvananandas. So one day he got hold of the life divine. After reading it, he said, no, what I have realized is nothing. So he changed his name to Anirban. And then he translated the life divine into Bengali, which was so beautiful. When it was taken to Sri Aurobindo, Sri Aurobindo did not even go through it. He just simply took it and said, give it to the press. And you will see that from that Bengali version, when Hindi translation has been done, it's very different, remarkable. The story was told to me by Chote Narayanji.
And I have a very nice story of two people. I won't mention names, but he was in the hospital for surgery many, many times. And he and his wife translated into modern Telugu the mother.
Oh. Wow. So that's how one has to consent to be nothing, that thou mayest be all.
Yes.
Annul thyself, that only God may be.
Namaste.